Hello everybody, this is Baron Robin, and in this video I'll explain to you some of the cool multiplayer selections. So I found that when I was playing with one friend, particularly, um, you can struggle to find a good combination of countries to play. And there are a few really awesome combinations of countries you can play which make a real in-depth game. And I'm going to share some cool co-op, some of these cool co-op scenarios with you today. So without lingering, the first combination of countries to play is Argentina and Peru. Playing in South America rather, can be a bit tricky because the United States will at some point go for the Monroe Doctrine and then the Pax Americana, which basically puts all the Southern American countries under protection, which means that if you declare war on them, America will declare war on you. So you need to be rather swiftly. This effect can be a bit random if you play with historical focuses turned off, because then, well, basically, America can start guaranteeing countries as early as, well, I think I've seen early 37. So you need to you need to get your things in order rather quickly, but playing together that should be even faster. I'll start off with Peru. Um, Peru is pretty cool. I think it's Peru. Peru has a very nice. Sorry about that. There's a very nice one military factory, but a decent amount of civilian factories. 8 of them, and you have a decent fleet. Normally, I don't start with fleet first, but you have a few, so you will have enough to bully Ecuador. You'll probably have enough to bully Colombia as well, and you'll probably have enough to bully Venezuela, which are your first 3 targets. Now, how do you sorry, just checking out my notes here. Yeah, so how do you go about? So firstly, you'll start creating a claim on Ecuador right away, which you can do pretty much instantly since you are a fascist. You're a fascist country, so you can already declare as soon as you have the political power. And I would suggest that you do that right away, and then because it's going to take quite some time for the war to spark, and during that time you can build up enough army to defeat Ecuador. And when you're done with Ecuador, you can immediately move on to Colombia, and after that you'll probably move on to Venezuela if there's enough time. This is actually also a cool single player strategy. So that's the cool thing of these 2 countries. If you combine Peru with Argentina, is that normally you could, with Peru, take over Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and that gives you the option to revive Bolivar's legacy, which well, you can read it up. It's the experiment of Gran Colombia. Basically gives you core on all the states here, and that's a pretty cool thing because you get a decent amount of manpower. Now, Peru does start off with a decent 6 million manpower, so you can actually start building something of an army, especially given the fact that you don't really have that many factories. And there are a few other cool perks. You can basically choose the armor, the chief of army, whatever you like. Probably I would go for the attack guy, and I would combine it with a decent air force. And I think Argentina should go for the navy. They actually start out with a decent navy, and then Peru can focus on the air force. I think you do need to diversify your countries because, well, you're not a major power to begin with, but together you can definitely be a major power, especially after you've conquered the whole of South America, which should be like your mid-game goal. In terms of military high command, you actually have a few decent commanders. This infantry guy is obviously great. You will probably want to combine it with this the logistics guy. It's pretty good since the supply in South America is atrocious, and there are lots of jungle, especially when you're trying to take out Brazil. A lot of jungle to walk through, and a lot of mountains here in the west. So you will be spending quite some time in decent attrition. So I think he's got decent value. So you want to get your offensive expert, your infantry guy, your logistics guy rather quickly. And then you may opt to boost your industry with the military factory production. And this is debatable whether or not you go for the silent workhorse after you formed your first claim. It's pretty good. You get decent amount of political power, and actually because you will be forming claims on Colombia and on Venezuela, and then perhaps on the allies. So you'll be spending a lot of political power on that, and you'll probably want to boost your stability as well. So you'll be spending quite a lot of political power. So I think he's a fair option to after creating your claim on Ecuador to go for the silent workhorse. And other than that, you focus on your air force. You start off with a decent air force, with which at least you can bully Ecuador and Colombia as well. I think Colombia, well, more or less rivals Colombia's air force. In terms of research, you only have 2 slots, and you should probably focus on your infantry, your doctrine, and whenever you can, research your fighter. Or if you please, because the ranges are relatively long in South America, you may want to go for a tactical bomber. That's up to you. Now, as far as your buddy is concerned, Argentina is pretty cool. Argentina starts off with a fairly decent army. You have a pool of manpower of 12 million, but you don't have the option to form any decent, well, you can't form Gran Colombia or anything. You can just expand, get resources, and get additional factories. So basically it's your own manpower which you have to work with throughout the game. But having said, 12 million should be decent to get you at least through the stage of taking over South America. Now Argentina has a decent amount of factories. You have 12 civilian factories and 3 military factories. So you can actually start off already producing a very nice army. Now what should you focus on? I think if you want to play the late game, you will need some form of navy. If you either want to go for the United States, or alternatively hop over to Africa, for which you'll need to control the Cape Verde plain and the African coast. So I think a decent navy is in order. So you want to focus on that. In terms of your priority targets, you want to take over Chile first, because they have a nice amount of steel, and then Bolivia. And if there's any time left, you can go Paraguay and Uruguay. But in terms of resources, you don't get a lot. And if you take them out later, it's actually fine, because they will go through their focus tree and build a fair amount of factories, which you can get for free as you run over them. Now, what should you build as Argentina? I think in terms of military high command, they're a bit weak. You only get the recovery rate, which is nice if you're moving a lot back and forth. but you don't really have those sort of fronts in South America. So late game, guys should be pretty cool. Probably you want to go for the logistics guy to get the attrition down. Again, for the jungle and the mountains, and maybe go for the capital ship guy. Build some battleships in combination with some light cruisers. Should be a decent army supported by the Air Force of Peru. Your offensive of your chief of army can be defensive or offensive. I would go for the offensive guy. And in terms of research, you only have 2 slots. You pretty much start out with the same techs as Peru, but you do start out with the mountain infantry, which I find very effective in taking out Chile. You also have a large front with them, which consists mostly of mountains. So if you start off by building 8 3 division mountaineers, you'll have a very easy war, and they are also very useful taking out Bolivia, and eventually you can well, I think that there's always a use for mountaineers. You can I always kind of plot them on a mountain range somewhere, and they'll hold their ground. In terms of so which side should you flip to as Argentina? Because you will want to fight the civilian war first. I think it's obviously the cool, the most immersive is to flip to fascist, given the relationship between fascist Germany and Argentina, and also your buddy Peru is fascist. So I think that's pretty logical. So one resource you'll run out of, because you have a nice supply of tungsten here, you have a fair amount of steel in Argentina to start out with. You'll actually also begin with a decent amount of oil, so you can get started on your navy. As you move over, you'll get more tungsten, so that should help your infantry armies if you want to go for artillery. And as Peru takes over Colombia and Venezuela, you'll have all the oil you'll ever need. And as soon as you take out the allied colonies, you'll have all the aluminium need. Note that you are lacking steel. Where should you get the steel? Well, probably you'll first get it from the East Asia co-prosperity sphere, if Japan actually forms it. Or alternatively, you can import it from the Soviet Union. I don't think you'll be ever going to war with the Soviet Union unless Paraguay joins the Comintern whenever you attack them. So you may want to be a bit cautious attacking them, or take them out early in the game, because then the Soviet Union doesn't care. And that's why actually landing in Africa is also a pretty cool meme, because you can try to dominate this bit of ocean, and then probably take out the Cape Verde Islands, and from there stage your invasion to Northwest Africa, where you have cool deposits. Well, I'm not sure if you're gonna to war with Spain right away, but at least here there are decent amounts of steel for yourself. So, idea number 1, Argentina, Peru. Idea number 2 is playing as the Dutch East Indies and Siam. Now, playing as Siam I find relatively boring, because you have to wait a fair bit for to build your army, but you can't really expand anywhere easily because you basically border on the Allies, France and the British Raj. So you'll have to wait until you're strong enough and the world is sort of at war, and then you can make your move, and then taking over Singapore immediately makes you very strong, because Singapore holds a huge load of resources. Now, to spice things up a little, and maybe even form your own faction, I think that would be the coolest idea, is to play to have your buddy play the Dutch East Indies. And the Dutch East Indies is a part of Holland at the start of the game. And so you'll have to fight civil war in order to alleviate yourself of their involvement. And you basically also start out with well, oh, I'm sorry, I still tagged as sorry, Argentina. I think it's in the Dutch East Indies. There you go. You start out with an abysmal 1 civilian factory, so you need a bit of time to develop your country, but that's okay because Siam also needs a bit of time. And you can opt to go. I think the easiest, fastest way to flip the Dutch East Indies would maybe be to go communist. And but you can either not join a faction or form your own. That's basically up to you. And in terms of what to build, so you can actually, if you as Indonesia take over all the Malaysian states, then you can reform the thalassocracy, of which I do not know the historical reference. And it basically gives you core on all the states, which is pretty decent in terms of manpower. So that's to be considered. Albeit giving Siam all those resources is actually probably a lot cooler. The thing is, if you remain neutral for quite a while, then well, the Dutch East Indies will be helped with their export, albeit rubber is not exported so quickly, so much. But as the war continues, if Japan stays in the game, you declare war on the Allies, you will have Japan importing stuff from you. Maybe some countries, such as the well, not the United States, because they have everything for themselves. But you may find yourself exporting quite a bit. In terms of army, the Dutch East Indies, they don't really get a special chief of army. They do get an artillery specialist, so it makes sense to build an artillery focused army. Then again, also the logistics guy is helpful because of the terrain. There's a lot of jungles on the smaller islands. It kind of depends on where you want to go, because I think you want to take out British Malaya to start out with, and then maybe you move on to Australia, you know. But your biggest problem is that you don't have a navy. So either you both build a navy, or one of the two starts to heavily focus on developing a navy, because you at least need to, at least shortly have enough control to land on Australia, and also to move your troops freely from the homeland of Indonesia into Siam to help combat the Allies. So I think in terms of research, you actually start out with a decent amount of naval research as the Dutch East Indies. So it makes sense to have them build a bit of the navy. So you can start out with light cruisers, combine it with battleships, or maybe actually simply go for carriers, and have Siam produce the fighters for you. That's a decent option. But that's definitely up to you. I'll tag Siam. Siam has the cool option to expand and to strengthen the Ratanakosin heritage, which is basically means that you get a core on Cambodia and Laos, situated in the French colony currently. So you'll have to go to war with them in order to expand. You start out with a decent amount of manpower, 15 million. Oh, that's actually, I forgot to mention the manpower of Indonesia. I have to go back. Indonesia. The manpower of Indonesia, the manpower pool is just totally awesome. You have 60 million pop available. So if you manage to give them all a gun, you're in fine shape. So you could actually have Siam play as your gun buddy. So moving back to Siam, you have a decent amount of manpower. So you should, in both cases, you'll be focusing heavily on producing simply basic infantry equipment for quite a while, just to give every guy a gun. In terms of air, I'm not sure if you can actually squeeze air development in as well. But you may want to give it a go, and then probably Siam is the more logical player to build the air force. Siam has a nice offensive, or maybe recovery, but I think an offensive general is probably the better one. And yeah, so in terms of military high command, you have the armor division guy, but you will never be able to produce decent amounts of armor divisions. So I think he's, at least early game, pretty much useless. But you do get a logistics expert, which is okay. And you get assigned workers at the beginning, or a captain of industry, which you will probably go for. Develop the industry of Siam relatively quickly, and then you should just wait. And so this is a cool option if you want to try out a bit of optimal building strategy. Move into 39, developing, building, and as soon as the world lights up, you join in, take out British Malaya, take out the French colony, hold the line behind one of the rivers with the British Raj, and then you basically hold tight. You hold tight. You try to retain as much of the Dutch East Indies as possible. You will get landed on eventually, and you may want to just focus on holding the main islands. This is all attached. Kalimantan is obviously loose, and then you have the Sulawesi. So probably want to hold on to these 3 bits and not care too much about Papua here. There's no real manpower coming from here anyway, and not any resources at all, and you'll probably not build your factories here either. So pretty cool option. Now moving on to my third option, which is basically dead in the center of Eastern Europe. You can play as Poland and Romania. And Poland has a very nice manpower pool. You have a pool of 32 million Polish guys, and you can reform the Commonwealth relatively quickly if you take out Lithuania. This gives you core on a lot of states, most of them Russian currently. So they sort of become your natural enemy. With the German Reich in your back, you should definitely take care in declaring war on both of them. So your choice of alignment matters, but I think the coolest choice is to go neutral. You can strengthen the Polish state, go for revanchism. This basically gives you the option to generate a war goal being neutral, with decreasing the tension limit by 40%. So basically, if world tension is on 10%, you can form your war goals, which should be relatively soon. And then you can take out Lithuania, form your Commonwealth, and in the meantime you will assist Romania, and maybe you can actually declare war for Romania on Czechoslovakia and expand really early on. So in terms of like halfway through 37, you can already have taken out a fair bit of land. Now, in terms of what you can build as Poland, well, you have a lot more options with these countries than with the countries we've seen prior to this. You have 3 research slots. You actually start out with decent infantry equipment. You have some support equipment to play around with. You could go for armored units, but I would not advise that. You have nice anti-air, so it's a good option to just go for infantry in combination with anti-air. Pretty cool. In terms of land doctrine, you may opt to go for a different one than the Grand Battle Plan, but it's I'm not going to go into these into the doctrines right now. I would leave the naval out. In terms of air, you can basically get your close air support and your fighters, or alternatively leave that up to Romania. But playing neutral, forming your own faction, definitely really cool idea. You can get a lot of hilarious games out of it. Alternatively, you can go fascist, fight a civil war, and you probably don't have the Germans attacking your back when you focus on the Soviet Union. It's a safer option, but it's also slightly more boring. Now, as far as Romania, your buddy, your sidekick goes, they actually have a nice pool of manpower as well. They have 18 million, so you can field a decent army. You can put them all behind the river. I don't know. And then you know, you have a very good staging ground to move into Russia. Also, in terms of national focus, you can actually start a faction really quickly with Romania. So you may want to consider going for this faction rather than the Polish Zorvina, or whatever it's called, because it takes the Polish player I think 2 more focus slots, so it takes like 140 days extra to get there. And I think it's cool to be in the faction very soon. And yeah, that's basically it. You have a few options to play neutral as well with Romania, which is, I don't know. I think it just, in terms of flavor, when you're playing together, if you join the Axis, you will make the Axis very overpowered. If you join the Comintern, you'll make them overpowered. Well, the Allies may be the most interesting in terms of if you choose one of the major powers, but I would always try to just go for it yourselves. You may end up in a situation that you have war with all of your surrounding, with all of your neighbors, and you'll have a very hard time getting any resources into your country. But that's, I think, simply a lot of fun. Romania has an infantry expert, and you actually get a commando as well, so you can make really cool, let's say, Marines, Mountaineers. Probably your most logical, your best bet. And you can basically build your infantry nicely as well, because you get your captain of industry. So really solid options. Alternatively, you can take Hungary as the buddy of Poland and reform the the Austria-Hungary, also playing neutral. So you restore Austria-Hungary, and you don't really need to go down the whole tree, because you can take over most of the countries by force, especially if you have Poland on your side, and you get a core, and then you can spend all your focus tree time on your industrial revitalization, get your research slots, and go down to your cool fighter designs, which and then you can basically be the air production for a Polish land army. Works really well. I've tried it out with a friend of mine. It's a lot of fun, and you actually play in the middle, in the thick of the war, which is really pretty cool. But those are basically my main suggestions. I just want to make an honorable mention to play as well, Germany and Italy, or play as the UK and France. But then you want to boost the difficulty rating to elite, make it a bit harder on yourself, and also actually tick the difficulty. Well, tick the boost. The boost slider to the right for your opponents, so that actually you get a really nice buffed German Reich and Italy, and well, basically all the major powers get boosted if you do that. And then you actually have a proper challenge on your hands, and you have a lot of flexibility because you have all the research slots in the world. You can make really cool armies, but you do have to move resources between the two countries, and you have to move army, equipment between your countries as well. Probably, one of the two focuses on the fighters, the other one focuses on on close air support. You really have to make choices if you play on those difficulty ratings, and it's pretty cool to do that together, and then play very immersed. Try to play historical or do whatever you like. So those are my suggestions. I suggest you try them out with a friend, and I'll also make another video on playing together with 3 players, which actually invites some other really cool opportunities. Talk to you next time.